Mike Seekleiner here, joining you from my good old office here. Hey, this morning we're going to be doing kind of a news cycle, so we're jumping into rifle stuff. So we're doing defensive rifles. I'm going to be talking to you about my defensive slash tactical rifle setup. We're going to talk about optics and compensators and suppressors and lights and slings and stocks and charging handles and safeties and everything you could possibly imagine. So let me get these guys out of my way and we'll check clear here in just a second. Yes. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube later on as well, go ahead and send a comment or place a comment in that YouTube section. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you happen to find this video somewhere. And for those of you that are watching me that are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that. We're desperately trying to hit, I don't know, I think it's 10,000 subscribers where we get to promote videos in a different way or something like that. So anyways, you know, I'm not looking for 1 million people, but 10,000 motivated people. So we're talking about defensive rifle, of course. If you're doing this with me, if you have your gun or your gear out, no live weapons or ammunition in your area. So do me a big favor and take a second right now and double check your long gun. And by the way, when we're talking about long guns, be very, very careful in terms of how you check. Like in terms of the chamber itself, I've actually had rifles and carbines where I've actually worked the bolt a couple times, gone to clear the system out, and then realized when I got the chamber in the light or used a flashlight that truly it wasn't clear. So double check. So physically, if you can, or visually, make sure you're checking those chambers, and you absolutely can see that that is clear. So I've got one clear system there. And I got a lot of stuff on my table here. I'm going to check this one as well. So this one a little bit heavier. We get a suppressor. Of course, I've got one clear system there, so I have nothing in those chambers. So do me a favor, check your systems. Make sure your rifles, if you have them near you, are completely unloaded and clear, so we're going to be safe the entire time. For those of you that are new to the live stream, I know some of you typed new a second ago. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to shooting-performance.com. and you can click on instructors and find out what my bio is, or you can go to MikeSeekleiner.com, which is probably easier for you to remember, and you can check out everything about me, who I am and what I do or whatever else. Of course, I'm sporting my Wilson Combat t-shirt this morning, and of course I'm going to show you some beautiful Wilson Combat rifles. But anyways, Training Addicts group on Facebook. As a reminder, if you're not on that group, it's the open group. If you're not a member of AWS or ACSS, you can still join the Shooting Performance Training Addicts group, where I post tips and I do different things like share information, post articles and stuff like that. Also, all of the events, like this event, my buddy Rich Brown's Coffee with Rich events are all posted on the Training Addicts group and linked. So normally we post those on that open group. So join the Training Addicts group, please, if you're not a member of that Addicts group. And by the way, if you don't realize it, I do podcasts as well. So if you haven't checked out our podcast, just a quick promo, search AmericanWarriorShow.com. There's some great podcasts. Matter of fact, the one we're going to release probably in the next couple days is probably my favorite interview ever. I won't tell you who it is right now, but it's really a great interview. This is the basics, by the way. You know, when we're talking about the basics, we're going to talk about gun gear setup. I'll answer all of your questions. And then, later on next week, I'll have to see what the schedule is. We're going to talk about the mount, drop, drive, press, drop, drive, push, press with the rifle. How do you effectively mount it? The difference between the strong hand, control system as well as the support hand, where the strong hand goes, where the support hand go. And then we'll get into shooting positions with the long gun. But remember, this is fundamental and basic. This is to take most of you maybe that are not one of our members or do not have the defensive rifle training program, and try to make you as good as I possibly can for free. It's free on Facebook. Of course, it's free on YouTube. The replay is something that we post the Friday after the live view goes on, and it's edited. So we take all of the, my little coffee breaks out where I'm sipping coffee and doing Q&A. So it's edited, it's cleaned up, so all of the content is there. And I pay someone to do that, and it's still 100% free. So do me a favor, check out the YouTube, okay? I got these the other day, and I wanted to show you them. I am pretty finicky about the charging handles that I use on my rifle. So this is the standard charging handle that Wilson Combat ships with most of their rifles that I have in a lot of my gear. I just got their new, I got actually a three set of their Wilson Combat charging handles, which are super robust. They're ambidextrous, so I'm a big fan of being able to use either hand. So if I'm shooting with my right hand or my left hand, and they come in 3 different sizes. So for example, the one in my right hand is the smallest size. The one in my left hand is the largest size. So you can see literally there's just a difference in the length of the actual charging portion of the handle. And then there's a medium. So this is 2 holes. The medium has 3 holes. The large has 4 holes. And they're pretty aggressive in terms of how they develop the charging handle. So you can, it catches on your hand, but it's not so aggressive where it tears your hand up. So these are for sale and available on Wilson Combat. I'm not showing you the medium because I actually took the mediums and put them on my PCCs. I'm going to the range today to shoot my PCC. So that's kind of a new piece of gear. Probably the best designed charging handle. You can look inside of it and see the thickness of the design. It's not flimsy. It's not one of those charging handles that you're going to be able to break at all, and I'm going to try to break them. But this is a, excuse me, a new piece of gear that they're making. So get on wilsoncombat.com, go to the store if you want a charging handle. Probably the best designed charging handle I've seen in a long time. Okay, let's talk about defensive rifle setup. And this is one of my favorite guns ever. I actually have 2 guns out here. I have my shortest rifle, and which has a suppressor on it. We're going to talk about suppressors. And then this one. This is actually a 14.7-inch welded comp, and actually the comp on this particular gun is the screw-on suppressor comp that Wilson Combat makes rifle. So this is my medium length rifle. It's not the shortest one I own, but uniquely enough, I wanted to talk real quickly about AR systems and barrel length in terms of you selecting your barrel length. And a lot of people are, they're really interested in the super short systems. Like the 10-inch guns, the 9-inch guns. All these super short AR systems, and I would caution you against a super short AR system for a few reasons. Number one, ballistically, they're not as effective as the guns that are a little bit longer. Number two, in terms of if it's a true gas gun, the timing on the gun is off slightly, because if it's a really short barrel, a lot of times there's a lot of pressure that gets pushed back into the chamber, which causes the maybe the brass to expand. By the way, I have a chapter in my book on this. And that expansion makes it very hard to extract. So that extractor is trying to pull the brass out. A lot of times, back when people were building and running really short guns, that's why we were getting a lot of case failures, was because of the incredible pressure of the gun. I had a conversation with Bill Wilson at one point in time, who owns, of course, Wilson Combat, and I asked him, because we were talking about 16-inch guns and different length guns, 18-inch AR systems, and Bill said, hey, by far the most accurate rifle they build is the 14.7. So for me, this is the barrel length to be good for home defense. It's still short enough where I could tuck it and I can get it into a close quarter shooting position. It's short enough where I could stick it behind the seat in my truck, but it's still accurate. I could shoot this gun out to 400 or 500 yards easily if I needed to. Not saying I would have a defensive purpose at 400 or 500 yards, but the point is, it's a great setup. All right, so let's talk about defensive rifle setup and some things that I am pay particular attention to. Number one, barrel length. We talked about this. This is the 14.7. This gun is a little bit shorter, right? So if you can see the difference in length of the 2 handguards, this gun in my left hand is slightly shorter, but it allows me to run the suppressor on the gun full time. So I leave the suppressor on this particular gun, and it ends up being about the same length as the other rifle with the suppressor on it, okay? Now here's the deal. In terms of the suppressor itself, why run a suppressor on a home defense rifle, right? Is there a reason for that? Absolutely. Think about this for a second. And back in the day, people used to ask, hey Mike, what about a suppressor on a home defense rifle? And suppressor has some downsides in terms of practicing and training. A suppressor oftentimes will run very hot, so you got to be careful. It sometimes will push more gas back into the rifle, so the rifle will run a little bit dirtier. But in terms of the upside of a suppressor, imagine you grab your home defense rifle. Let's say I grab this one, right? And door kick in the middle of the night. And I lock and load. Load the rifle, get ready to rock and roll. Sling up, and I got my family members. So the next thing I know, I've got someone in my living room. And I mount that rifle, my family's right there, and boom, I'm taking shots with the rifle, right? Defending my family. Everything's good and fine, right? except for the fact that they, and probably I, will not be able to hear. I won't be able to hear, they won't be able to hear because of the incredible noise this is going to create. And even though this is a very effective comp, or call it whatever you want, it's a muzzle brake slash comp, it very successfully vents the gas out to the sides. So if my family members are somewhere off to the side, they're going to eat a lot of that gas and that noise. And at a minimum, it's going to be very difficult for me to communicate to them and say, hey, guys, go run over to cover or do whatever is necessary. Now, on the other hand, I grab, this shorter rifle. It has a full-time suppressor on that I typically leave on it. And even though, from the aspect of firing a shot, because the round is supersonic, there's still going to be a pretty good crack. It may hurt their ears a little bit. I guarantee you could fire 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shots with a suppressed rifle and be much more effective in terms of being able to communicate with your family members. So if you have the ability, certainly consider a suppressed rifle. Okay, so let's talk about other priorities. We talked about a suppressor. Number 2 thing that I need to have on my home defense rifle is a weapon-mounted light. Okay, so basically if you see my gun, I have a full-time weapon-mounted light at 6 o'clock, and I got the pressure switch activator at 12 o'clock. And I'm pretty specific about this. I don't like the light mounted on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, and boy, I really don't necessarily like the light mounted at 12 o'clock. Now here's the deal, in terms of weapon-mounted lights and lighting systems. I did try a standard, handgun type stream light mounted at the top of the gun multiple times. And it failed every single time. And here's why. Because when the light is on the top of the gun and you shoot a few shots, I see a lot of lights on the Instagram, right? See a lot of lights mounted on the top of guns. They look really cool, but I oftentimes wonder if those individuals, practiced with those guns and actually, did what they need to do in terms of training and testing. What happens is, if I turn this dot on and I have a light on the top of the gun, right? And I activate the light, and then I shoot a couple shots. The smoke in the cloud from those shots fired is going to be all around the muzzle, right? Especially in an area where it's hot and humid. Like right now during the summertime, it's super hot and humid where I am. So there's going to be a little bit of smoke, more than you would think. Fire 5 or 6 shots, there might be a lot of smoke. Then the light on the top of the gun is illuminating that smoke where your dot is. So what happens is the light illuminating that smoke and kind of reflecting back, believe it or not, blocks your target to an extent, and you can't get the dot on the target like you need to. So I tried 12 o'clock. Trust me, I tried it, but then I went back to 6 o'clock every single time. Now, for those of you that are going to mount a light on your rifle, I don't mount them on the 3 o'clock or the 9 o'clock positions on the sides of the rifle, because I want to be able to brace. I want to be able to take the rifle and quick brace up against something like here, like a wall, or brace against the corner of a vehicle or an edge of a wall or something like that to take a very precise shot. And if there's stuff on the side of the rifle, it makes it hard to brace. So I'm a big fan of mounting my weapon-mounted light at 6 o'clock. And notice how my pressure switch allows me to mount. I could switch hands to my right hand, I could switch hands to my left hand, and my activation of the light is the same. So my switch is the exact same spot. Now, this particular light on this gun is a light and laser combination. This particular light is just a light combination. A couple things that I like about these lights. And these are both made by Streamlight. This is a TRL2, and this is one of their rifle lights. Now this one gives me the advantage, when you're looking for lights, of activating via the pressure switch, right? So just temporary activation, but it also has a permanent switch. Now what's the advantage of a permanent switch? A permanent switch allows me to activate the light, for example, and I could tuck the rifle if I needed to move something or go to a close quarter position, and I could still use the light maybe to move something out of the way, where I want the light on for a second to search what's behind that area, but I'm using this other hand to move something out of the way, and I'm keeping the rifle as close as I need to. We're talking about some advanced positional stuff here, but the point is that full-time switch is important to me. Most often, I'm using the light just to activate, search, turn it off, search, turn it off, right? So I like this light because it gives me the ability to permanently activate the light or momentarily activate the light. So when you're looking at a light, consider that. And by the way, in terms of the other light, the light laser combination for this particular gun, Granted, I don't know if you can see it on the wall or not. Can you see that laser on the wall back there? You might not be able to see it. So when I activate this sucker, I have a light and a laser. And I like to zero the laser so it's parallel to the bore. So theoretically, maybe if I didn't get the dot turned on, which would be kind of foolish because with these aim points, I need to leave them on full time. There's no reason to turn them off. But if this failed, I don't necessarily have to rely on my backup iron sights, although I think those are important to have on the long gun. But what I want to do is I'm just going to use that laser on the light itself. So I can see the dot in my scope right now, and I can see the laser, and I can actually see the front sight. So I have multiple sighting options in terms of where I'm shooting. The other advantage of having, if you pick a light laser combination for your rifle, is I can be in kind of a weird position, and I can know exactly where the laser is pointing. So if I had to retract the gun back to try to protect it, go to a protective position or something like that, I can still use the laser to aim it. So put a light on your rifle. I strongly suggest you mount it at 6 o'clock. Get away from the 3 and the 9 o'clock mounting positions. Avoid the 12 o'clock position. If you have a light mounted at 12 o'clock, go test it, folks. I'm telling you, I think if you test it in real conditions, you'll find it fail more often than not, if that makes sense, okay? I like the pressure activated switch on the top of the gun, okay? Now granted, with these guns, they both have optics. These are both patrol rifle optics made by Aimpoint. Aimpoint has the advantage of incredible battery life, and they're not a sponsor. I'm not sponsored by any optic company. I just have been running Aimpoints for a lot of times on a lot of rifles. I probably have 10 or 12 Aimpoints, and these suckers hold up, okay? So typically, I'll turn them on, probably click them back all the way to full intensity back, and then I can leave the dot on. So I can leave this sucker on literally for a year at a time, right? And then I could change the batteries out once per year, okay? Now, in terms of the optic, one of the things that I don't know if I've discussed on the lives here is the mounting position for the optic itself. Do we mount the optic farther back so we can maybe, see through more of the scope? Or do we mount the optic farther forward so it doesn't occlude our vision as much, meaning it's not blocking as much of the vision? Because think about this for a second. The farther the optic is mounted forward on the gun, the smaller it becomes in perspective. So the smaller it is in terms of the area that it's covering up. So I'm a fan of mounting the optic a little farther forward. Matter of fact, this one is actually probably 1 or 2 notches farther back than I would normally mount the optic. I will probably, in the near future, mount that sucker a little bit farther forward, okay? I'm not a fan of doing a lot of searching through the scope, right? Oftentimes with my students, I want them, to have the rifle or the scope out of their vision so they're not occluding it, and then quickly mount the rifle if they need to mount the rifle to search, okay? So I'm not a fan of actually searching with the optic. But anyways, Aimpoint's good to go. I have an Aimpoint Micro, great scope as well. I've owned EOTechs, and there are some other manufacturers that make some great optics out there. This just happens to be an affordable, cheaper version of the standard Aimpoint patrol rifle optic. It comes with a mounting solution and works well. Now, on all the guns I have backup iron sights. So I do have a set of sights, both a front sight and of course a backup rear sight. Now, when I'm running the rifle, I normally leave the front sight up and the rear sight down. I can also, if I need to, I can reach back and flip that rear sight up if I need to deploy it. But what I see through the optic itself is I see, in the center of the optic, I can see my front sight, right? So if something happened and my dot turns off, assuming I still have a good cheek weld, my cheek is in the same position, right? Okay. And I am in a position where I can still use that front sight to aim if I need to if my dot fails, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the theory behind that front sight up, okay? So here's the deal on slings, right? I am an advocate or a proponent of single point slings, right? But at the same time, I also recognize the value of a 2-point sling for most people. And Elke, Alan, I'll address your question here in a second. The reason I run a single point is because I'm not in a job anymore where I'm going to have to put hands on someone and arrest and control or whatever else. And I can grab my rifle out of my safe and sling it up very quickly. And then a single point with a single attachment point in the right spot also allows me to switch shoulders back and forth, where if I have this detached on a 2-point attachment system, it's a little bit more challenging for me to switch shoulders in terms of the sling. Where the single point is in a position where it's a little bit lower and allows me to switch positions just a little bit easier if I go to both sides. And I'm an advocate, of shooting off of both shoulders. If you're using a right or left edge of a wall for a position of cover. So typically that's why I want a single point. Now, if you're in law enforcement, I recognize the fact that you may have to use a 2-point setup and take that rifle and sling it on your back, and then go effect arrest or handcuff someone or do whatever else. So if you're in the military or law enforcement, certainly recommend probably a 2-point system. This one is made by Magpul. It's just one I had on this particular rifle, or I have had for a long time. Works well. This one I can set up as a 2-point sling. Certainly an option there, but I normally run a single-point system. There are 3-point slings and some other standard slings. Like back in the day when I was in the Marine Corps, we were, we just had a standard sling to put the gun on our back. They weren't the kind of cool tactical slings they make nowadays. I certainly wouldn't recommend that. In terms of lumens, I had a question earlier. I think it was Alan that asked about lumens. These particular, and hold on, Elke, I'll answer that here in just a second. These particular lights, that light and this light, is probably closer to 200 lumens. They're pretty darn bright lights. They're the newer lights. And I know there's some people out there that have said, hey, there's no such thing as too many lumens. I disagree with that. I think that's complete crap. I have handheld lights, and I've seen weapon-mounted lights. For example, I have one in here somewhere. It's like 750 lumens. In darkness, if you're searching a room or around a room, and your eyes have adjusted that low light, let's say you've never activated the light at all, and you're searching rooms, and then finally you get into a room with a handheld light or a weapon-mounted light, and you activate that light for a quick search. And it's a room that has light walls like these, and your eyes are already adjusted to low light, right? So they're, your pupils are opened way up or whatever. When you hit that light and turn that light on, if it's so bright that the washback from the walls affects your vision, to me that's too bright. So to answer the question, certainly I like a good, brilliant, bright light. But when we get too much beyond a couple hundred lumens, then I think that's probably unnecessarily bright in most conditions where you are searching a room or a house or a place. And I'm not talking about someone that may have a rifle set up for dual use where, like the rancher or someone that lives up in the mountains or someone that has maybe the opportunity to use their light to illuminate a critter, a coyote or something, or maybe illuminate and check their property for someone that lives, maybe on the south border of Texas that may have illegals or, someone running dope through their property. That may be a good reason to have a brighter light. I like a standard light that just turns on and turns off with a momentary or permanent feature. This is probably my choice of a light for a weapon-mounted light. And this system comes with a screw-on, deal that I can screw on a rail. I like to mount the light as far forward as possible so I can run my forward hand as far forward as possible on the rifle itself. I don't want the hand back here, right? I want to have more control over the rifle. We'll talk about the stance and the mount platform and stuff like that in the very near future, okay? So I think it was Elke might have posted a question. If you have questions about guns and gear, go ahead and post them. And I'm going to summarize. I don't have a lot more time, folks. One thing about the guns, like this particular gun, I need to change out and do a safety setup that is ambidextrous. So I'm a big fan of ambidextrous safeties. So, I could switch hands if I need to, and I can wipe the safety off with that left hand, right? And all I'm doing is I'm using my left hand to run that safety. I have a little shorter one on that side because more often than not, I'm going to be shooting the gun with my right hand. And that short switch that allows me to throw that switch, and it's not in the way of my finger when I actually throw it off, if that makes any sense, okay? And here's the deal with this. If this is, if it's not ambi, then my only option, if I go to my left hand, is to take this trigger finger and use it to wipe the safety, which works okay, but it kind of affects my grip, or to reach over and not have a good grip on the rifle itself and use that left hand thumb. I don't like that because now I don't have a grip on the rifle itself. So I'm a fan of ambi safety, and I'm also a fan of the 45-degree throw. This one doesn't have it on because it doesn't work well with this trigger, but the 45-degree throw system wipes on and off very, very quickly. Now, on all these rifles, on some of my older rifles, I used to have like the Magpul bad lever, battery assist device or whatever else, that allowed me to manipulate the bolt and release the bolt with my trigger finger. Some people poo-poo on the bad lever. I didn't have any problems. I had one on a rifle for years and years and years. It makes releasing the bolt a little faster during a reload. It also allows me to lock the bolt to the rear, without having to come over the top and switch hands. So the bad levers are probably a pretty good option. In terms of triggers, these triggers are all, this is a single stage trigger. I don't normally run a two-stage type trigger on most of my rifles simply because I don't need to. I don't feel like there's really any reason for me to have a prep point, if that makes any sense, on the trigger itself. So I'm a single point fan, and of course good collapsible stocks. Now these are the stocks, these are the Rogers Surefire stocks that that Wilson Combat sends with their rifles, and I stick to them. I think they're great stocks. They lock down effectively, so if that makes sense, okay? So I heard someone say something about the noise, or maybe someone posted a question. I missed it. I'm not sure if we saw that, but I'm basically showing two systems off. One with a suppressor, one with not. I think a good home defense or tactical rifle setup is probably going to be benefited greatly from a suppressor, so we can shoot it around our family or our teammates or whatever else without having a problem with noise. You touch this sucker off with this muzzle brake or a comp or something like that, next to a group. Maybe you're in law enforcement, that's probably not a great option. And certainly around your family members, they're not going to be able to hear or communicate, and they may be permanently damaged from that gas and that noise. So I think a good home defense AR system, whether it's a rifle or even maybe a shorter version with an arm brace and it's a pistol, is probably better off with a suppressor on the gun itself, okay? All right, folks, so I talked about backup iron sights, we talked about ambi safeties, we talked about locking stocks, talked about suppressors, lights, light position, where I like my light. We talked about lumens. Someone asked a good question about the lumens. We've talked about a lot of things here. Slings, like I said, my preference is a single point sling, but I understand that a lot of you in law enforcement probably are better off with a 2-point system, 2-point sling, Good question, Elkie. So in terms of home defense ammo, I just typically run a standard, 223 round, 55 grain, hollow point or whatever else that normally what I follow along with, something that's not going to have a lot of penetration. Like a lot of law enforcement agencies select, they'll select their 223 ammo that has certain vehicle penetration characteristics and stuff like that. I'm not going to be shooting at a car or against a car in my home defense rifle system. So I'll just typically select something that I believe to be ballistically efficient and that will, that will open up and do the damage necessary, but at the same time will not over penetrate. But understand, folks, if you're shooting a 223 in your home and you don't know what your walls are made of or have an idea, it's going to penetrate and penetrate and penetrate. We've done a lot of testing with 223, and it's going to go through wall after wall after wall. Okay, it's not going to break up and start twinging all over the place like a lot of people think it does, okay? In terms of muzzle up or muzzle down when you're slung, I think you're talking about on your back. Typically on my single point, it's going to be muzzle down, right? I think with a 2-point, I'm going to probably prefer muzzle down position as well, but I think there's probably pros and cons to both of those. But of course, like I said, I run primarily a single point sling on my systems. Okay? Ooh, David, good question. I'm assuming if you're asking 9mm or 223, you're talking about in a long gun. That's a great question. I think either is efficient and effective. I think ballistically a 223 is gonna do more damage quicker, have more stopping power. A lot of people running. It's a great question. A lot of people, if you own, for example, let's say you're a defensive shooter and you carry a Glock handgun on a regular basis and you decide you want a long gun system for home defense use. Certainly a long gun like my AR9 PCC platform is probably a good option because then I can run the same magazines, same ammo, same calibers. I could certainly go out and train on steel targets on the range. So I may lean slightly toward 9mm in that case, but at the same time, The 223 allows me to go and I could use it against predators. You know, I could use it as a ranch rifle. I could hunt with it, but I can also effectively engage, you know, 60, 70, 180 yards if I needed to. Now here's the deal, full disclosure, we talk about that kind of stuff as civilian shooters. We're not going to probably have a legal reason to shoot at 130 or 150 yards in 99 times out of 100. But then again, from a ballistic standpoint, the 223 is superior. That's why, of course, you know, that's why our military fighters are shooting a 223 versus a carbine in most cases, if that makes sense. Okay. And Steve, we'll get on. I'll show my PCCs. We'll bring some carbines on in a future show, maybe after the third or fourth show with the long gun systems. Okay. And this, with the addition of my sling, when I switch my slings out, is about as perfect as it can get for home defense. But this is not my primary home defense tool. My primary home defense tools are handguns with a full-time light laser combination in quick access safes in my office, in my bedroom, or whatever else. Because if you're in a position where you're going to use a long gun for home defense, full-time home defense, my question to people is how are you going to secure that? Where are you going to put this thing, right? And a lot of people say, well, I don't have kids anymore. I'm just going to leave it under my bed. I don't know. I'm not a fan of leaving a full-time loaded defensive weapon unsecured. I would not recommend that to my viewers. So for me, I can have handguns staged in quick access safes all over the house that are locked up and secured completely, that I can enter a code of being in 2 seconds and grab the handgun. So we talk about these long guns. They're great defensive tools, but you've got to have a way to secure them. Now there are some quick access safes where you can stage these things and they drop out, but anyways, that's my point. I think it was maybe Julio asked rifle or shotgun. I think they're both very effective. For me, a modern AR system, you know, with a suppressor and a light and an optic and a high round count is going to be my choice or more effective. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's better than a good shotgun, right? A good shotgun is a great home defense tool. But once again, you know, I had a guy that was recommended to a loved one recently, hey, get rid of your handgun. That's a stupid home defense tool. You should have a shotgun. So, you know, by the way, we did a podcast on this because you can just point it and shoot, which is not true at all. That's complete crap. But once again, if you have a shotgun, I would ask, where and how are you going to secure it for quick access? So if a bump happens in the middle of the night, you can grab that sucker. Right? So think about that for a second. Okay. Again, we talked about defensive rifle setup for home defense or tactical use. Understand that what I'm talking about is more of the civilian defender, but a lot of these things apply to you law enforcement officers as well. So I'm not telling you there's a way or one way to do things, but there are some different options to setting up your home defense type rifle. But think about the things I've discussed: the suppressor, a good optic, a sling system based on what you're trying to do, whether it's a single point or 2 point. If you're climbing and doing more hands-on, probably a good 2 point. Specifically with the right attachment points, not the wrong attachment points. Okay, and we can talk about that in a future show. And ambi safety, so you can run the safety with both sides of the gun, and a good weapon mounted light. Okay, if you own an AR, or if you know someone that owns an AR, because remember, during the Obama administration, we literally sold millions and millions and millions of these guns, and they stayed in boxes, and people didn't set them up, they didn't train with them, they didn't know how to use them. Please find those people, if you know one of them, and send this live stream to them, or send them to my YouTube page and tell them to watch it so they can set their gun up properly, or think about how to set it up properly. This coming Friday when we post that on YouTube. And then, of course, tell them to join us next week and the week after so we could talk about defensive rifle position, like how do we mount it, you know, the stance position, the feet, drop, drive, press, understanding how to work, you know, both sides of cover and stuff like that, because that's important stuff. All right, so do me a favor, share, get that rifle set up, get out there and test it. By the way, if you don't test it and shoot it, you don't know what works and what doesn't work. So stay safe. Have a great Wednesday. See you next time.